Good afternoon, everyone. Shalom. I'm Tal Heinrich, spokesperson for the Israeli Prime Minister's office. Today is day 228 of the October 7th war, and our war aims remain the same: to destroy Hamas's military and governing capabilities, to free all 128 hostages, and ensure that Gaza does not pose a threat to Israel ever again. All objectives are within reach. We'll begin with an update on IDF casualties. Since the outset of the October 7th massacre, IDF fatalities have unfortunately risen to 631. Sergeant Major Ran Yaavatz was 39 years old from Modi'in, and he was in the reserves. He fell on the Gaza border. He leaves behind 3 children. His wife is in her 9th month of pregnancy. Sergeant Ben Avishai was 20 and from Nahariya and fell in battle in northern Gaza. Sergeant Noam Bitan was 20 from Moshav Yad Rambam and fell in battle in southern Gaza. First Sergeant Nachman Meir Chaim Vaknin was 20 from Elat and fell in battle in southern Gaza. Major Gal Shabbat was 24 and was injured in battle on May 15th in northern Gaza. May their memories be a blessing. Our hearts go out to all the families of those soldiers killed in action, as well as those who were murdered, taken hostage, and wounded. Now to our efforts to facilitate humanitarian aid into Gaza. Since the beginning of the October 7th war, more than 500,000 tons of aid has entered Gaza. Kerem Shalom and Erez crossings are open, and aid is flowing in. On Monday, 402 aid trucks went in and 422 on Sunday. In addition to the land routes and the daily airdropping of aid pallets, the offshore floating pier established in coordination with the U.S. Central Command is operational. And to date, over 569 metric tons of aid were delivered across that pier. We are aware of reports of aid from that pier getting looted by Palestinians, and we're working to address the matter. Moving on to the outrageous decision by the ICC prosecutor Karim Khan to seek arrest warrants against the democratically elected leaders of Israel. As the Prime Minister noted yesterday, this is a travesty of justice. It makes a mockery of international law. This is not about Prime Minister Netanyahu or Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. It's a vicious smear that is meant to do one thing and one thing alone: prevent Israel from exercising its right of self-defense in one of the most justified wars in modern times against a genocidal threat called Hamas, an Iranian proxy in Gaza, in a war that we didn't start and didn't want. And to that we say, there is no power in the world that will prevent us from bringing back all our hostages and toppling the Hamas terrorist regime. There is no power in the world that would tell Israeli mothers to stop fighting for their daughters that are being sexually abused by Hamas monsters for more than 220 days now. There is no power in the world that will push us to commit a public suicide and stop defending ourselves just to satisfy anti-Semites. As we've been saying and demonstrating for months, Israel is 100% compliant with international humanitarian law and the laws of armed conflict. The charges presented by the ICC are a complete distortion of reality. Israel has taken unprecedented steps in the history of urban modern warfare to protect civilians in Gaza. No other nation has told its enemy exactly when and where its forces are going to operate so that people can evacuate way ahead of time to safer areas, urging them to leave the battle zones with millions of phone calls, text messages, leaflets, social media announcements. We do all of that despite the clear enhanced risk to our forces, given the fact that we lose the element of surprise. Israel does not target civilians in Gaza. Our fight is with Hamas. And like in every war throughout history, there is tragic collateral damage. But it is a result of Hamas's sick methods of using civilians as their human shields, purposely putting them in harm's way. Now, by drawing a false, sick equivalence between Israeli leaders and Hamas leaders, between those using their own children as shields and those going out of their way to protect all children, Israeli and Palestinians, the prosecutor is perpetuating wars, not promoting any prospect of peace. It's not justice that it's seeking. It's a continuation of a reality in which Israelis can get slaughtered and raped and burned. Imagine creating a moral equivalence after September 11th between President Bush and Osama bin Laden, or during the Second World War between FDR or Churchill and Hitler. How ridiculous. And beyond ridiculous is the charge that accuses Israel of causing starvation as a method of war. There is no starvation in Gaza. There is the narrative of starvation pushed by Israel's enemies that continues to incentivize Hamas's ongoing attempts to steal food from the population, fire at food distribution routes, and sell food for a high price in the markets. Since the beginning of the war, about 400 tons of food have entered the Gaza Strip. More than 4 football stadiums full of aid have gone into Gaza in the last 24 hours alone. 80% more food is entering Gaza every day now than before October 7th. That's the reality. These are the facts. There is no policy of denying food from the population. On the contrary, we want as much food to enter Gaza as possible and have taken unprecedented efforts to enable that. Against these blood libels that are playing right into Hamas's strategy, we call on the nations of the civilized free world, nations who despise terrorists and anyone who supports them, to stand by Israel. You should outright condemn this step, like the US did, UK, Germany, Italy, and the Czech Republic, for instance. Make sure the ICC understands where you stand. Oppose the prosecutor's decision and declare that even if warrants are issued, you do not intend to enforce them. Because this is not about our leaders. It's about our survival as the nation of Israel. Jews, Christians, and Muslims who refuse to die in the hands of terrorists. And that is the end of our briefing today. I will now address your questions.
Thank you. First question from Benjamin Wipe from Fox News. Benjamin Weinthal. German officials has been tasked with fighting anti-Semitism. Michael Bloom said yesterday that the father of the IDF, Ord Wingate, is a, quotes, war criminal and blamed Bibi for the Hamas invasion. He also wrote that Bibi should tear down the security fence. General Amir Avivi called for Bloom to be fired. Does the Prime Minister's office agree with Avivi?
So I am aware of these quotes, and I'll just say this. One of the very first statements that the Prime Minister delivered in the beginning of the war, right after October 7th, he underscored that this is a time for moral clarity. And comments that we've seen from Mr. Bloom, as you just described, and also in the past about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in general, or historically, what you mentioned that he said, allegedly said about Ord Wingate, and throughout this war, it demonstrates that he often lacks moral clarity. Now, whether or not he should stay in this role, I think it's not in my place to say, but generally speaking, when you're on a mission to fight anti-Semitism, you have to be able to clearly differentiate between what's good and what's evil, and there's no gray zone when it comes to the hatred of Jews.
Thank you. Question from Dan Williams from Reuters. What is the reason for today's IDF raid in Jenin?
So the IDF, we've been operating in Jenin, which is, I would call it a mini Gaza in the West Bank for many weeks, for months now, as you know, because there are many terrorists there, terror infrastructure. We've eliminated terrorists there. We've apprehended many terrorists there as well. And I don't know, I will have to get back to you and talk to the IDF, or you can ask them yourself about the specific raid that you're inquiring about. But again, generally speaking, we've been operating in Jenin for many, many months for very good reasons against terrorism.
Thank you. Next question from Dan Williams of Reuters. What is Israel doing to counter the ICC request for arrest warrants?
So I cannot speak about our legal strategy moving ahead. Besides the statement that I just gave you about the ICC, you'll soon hear from the Prime Minister himself in various interviews that he's done throughout the day. But here's the thing that one has to remember, that the ICC's jurisdiction does not apply to Israel. And we also call on, as I just said in the briefing, by the way, the nations of the civilized world are allies. They know exactly what we expect them to do, and we conveyed this message to our friends around the world and anyone who has moral clarity.
Thank you. Third question from Dan Williams of Reuters. Should the warrants be granted, do Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defence Minister Gallant plan to stop visiting ICC signatory countries?
Let's wait and see.
Thank you. Question from David Clement from the News Forum in Canada. There are reports of aid piling up on the Egypt side of the Rafah border. Has there been any progress on either reopening that crossing for aid or rerouting it to the Kerem Shalom crossing?
Well, thank you for bringing this issue up, because it's important. You know, after our forces have taken control, a very important step that we've done of the Gazan side of the Rafah crossing, we said that we want to see this crossing remain operational. So if it was up to us, Rafah would have been operational days ago already, if not weeks. But it takes two to tango, you know. I think this question, as it stands at the moment, should be addressed to Egypt. There are two sides to this border. We certainly want as much aid to flow into Gaza. And, you know, I just gave you a lot of numbers to show you how we're doing it. There are different routes, different land routes. There's the pier, there are aid-dropped operations that we're conducting, but we definitely want to see Rafah open. It's just not a question that should be addressed to us at this point.
Thank you. Further question from Dan Williams at Reuters. The US ambassador said today that normalization with Saudi Arabia would require that Israel agree to a period of quiet in Gaza and to discuss the future of Palestinian governance. What's your response?
So the Prime Minister said it very clearly in recent months what we want to see happening in Gaza in the day after Hamas. When we say the day after, we mean the day after Hamas. We want to see a Gaza that is demilitarized and de-radicalized. We want to see an overriding Israeli security responsibility there, because we have to go in and out and continue to operate against any kind of future attempt at resurgence of terrorism. Now, in terms of the broader region, of course, we want to expand the circle of peace. We haven't been shy about this. This is our purpose. We have a record of making peace with nations in our region, and we will continue to push to expanding that. But no peace that we would not agree to any peace that would ever jeopardize Israel's security. I think that has to be clear. Any peace initiative that jeopardizes Israel's security is not something that we see as real peace. So keep that in mind.
Thank you. Question from Joel Pollack of Breitbart News. Firstly, is Israel concerned that ordinary soldiers and reservists could be targeted by the ICC?
Well, we have concerns, but as I said, the jurisdiction of the ICC does not apply to us, and let's see how things unfold.
Second question from Joel Pollack. Should the United States restore President Trump's sanctions against the ICC?
We told our American counterparts, our best friend in Washington, exactly what we want to see. And I'm also sure you'll hear from the Prime Minister about that in his upcoming interviews.
Third question from Joel Pollack. Under the existing U.S. law, the President of the United States is authorized to use any means necessary to free American citizens or citizens of allied countries who are detained by the ICC. Will Israel ask President Biden to exercise that authority?
Well, we are sure that just like us, the U.S. administration, and we know it for a fact, want to see all hostages released. This is one of the war objectives as we defined it on October 7th. And as I said, this has not changed. We're working tirelessly, as well as many people in Washington, to try to bring to their release. And we want to see it happening.
Thank you. Question from Hannah Julian at the Jewish Press. A White House readout says that in his recent talks with Israeli officials, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan reviewed U.S. recommended alternative steps for the IDF to secure victory over Hamas. Can you share any specifics about the alternative steps for Israel's fight against Hamas that were recommended by the Biden administration?
If there's one thing that as you know, I've been doing many briefings throughout this war, if there's one thing that we don't share is operational military strategy moving ahead, or talking exactly about what's happening militarily on the ground in Gaza as we speak. So whatever we have to tell our American counterparts in that respect about, operational strategy, the way we see things, the IDF, the security establishment in Israel sees things, these are the kinds of conversations that are taking place behind closed doors for very good reasons.
Thank you. Question from Cliff from Jacaranda FM. Do you think the ICC made the arrest warrants application under pressure excuse me, following the ICJ matter?
I do not want to speculate here. I think it's a question that you can ask the ICC itself. It's not something that I want to speculate about. I'll just say that, this is one court pushing a blood libel against Israel, and this is another court pushing a blood libel against Israel. But in its very essence, these prosecutions are meant to do, when you really boil it down, as I said, one thing and one thing alone: to prevent Israel from defending itself, from exercising its right of self-defense, full stop. We're operating against bloodthirsty terrorists. We're operating against Hamas. This is a war of survival. It's not like we have another choice. I just started this briefing today by reading out the names of fallen soldiers. Does anyone think that we want to send our best sons to fight a war that we didn't start? Of course not. We don't have a choice. We don't have a choice. There's an existential genocidal threat that we're facing. And of course we don't want to send our best children and husbands and fathers to the battle zone. But we need to survive as a nation.
Thank you. Question from Louis Boudouin-Larman from Agence France Presse. There are reports that Al-Auda hospital in northern Gaza has been the target of an IDF operation in the past 3 days. Can you confirm and say a little more on this operation?
No, I can't confirm. You can ask the IDF. I will also inquire. I'm not specifically aware of a report of an operation there. But again, as you know, we have been operating in the vicinity and in hospitals in Gaza. And in most hospitals where we've gone in, we've found loads of ammunitions, terrorists. We've had, shootouts with terrorists in the compounds of where hospitals are located and so forth. And unfortunately, this is part of Hamas's tricks. That's their sick method of war, trying to turn civilian structures, even the most sensitive ones, into battle zones.
Thank you. Another question from Hannah Julian of the Jewish Press. Can you confirm the discovery of a terror tunnel crossing into Israeli territory from Tulkarem? Any details?
No details on that.
Thank you. Question from BIM Group, JP Rubin. Do you think that sometimes there is no other solution than praying to the Creator and asking for His help?
I think prayers help. Prayers certainly help. Good energies, thoughts, moral clarity, prayer, that's my personal answer here, also reflects these, and prayers certainly help. And we appreciate them.
Thank you. Question from Jim Williams at Zenka International News Service, Washington, D.C. Yesterday, Secretary of State Blinken, after condemning the ICC's actions towards Israel's leaders, stated that he was surprised by the action because Mr. Khan of the ICC was supposed to be in Israel to talk with government leaders about possible charges. Is that the way the Prime Minister understood things to be?
I cannot describe to you exactly how things unfolded and are still unfolding vis-a-vis the ICC.
Thank you. That's the last question.
And that concludes the briefing for today. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for watching. Drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and hit subscribe to stay updated with our latest content. Until next time, stay informed and inspired. This is Dejobnik signing off.